don't just want the news, they want the truth. What others hide, I bring to you with evidence. Politics, corruption, human rights. No filters, no fear, just facts. I don't stop until the system shakes. Hello and welcome to Trending Daily. This is Makhdoom Shahabuddin. India has released a new documentary presenting its version of Operation Sindoor, but Pakistan is pushing back. And Islamabad's message is clear. A documentary cannot rewrite what happened on the battlefield. Pakistan's military media wing, ISPR, has rejected the production as a highly dramatized and factually inaccurate portrayal of last year's military confrontation. Pakistan has accused New Delhi of attempting to give the operation a favorable color while avoiding the difficult realities of what happened during the conflict. So the question is very simple. If the battlefield produced facts that both sides witnessed, can a carefully produced documentary really change those facts? Today, we look at Pakistan's response, India's narrative, and the growing battle over how Operation Sindoor will be remembered. India's documentary presents Operation Sindoor as a major military success. The production focuses heavily on India's planning, decision-making, and military response. Indian officials have also used the documentary to explain the thinking behind the operation. India's National Security Advisor, Ajit Doval, has described the operation as an 88-hour military campaign designed to target what India identified as terrorist infrastructure following the Pahalgam attack. But Pakistan strongly disputes the way India is presenting the conflict. ISPR says India is attempting to turn a complicated military confrontation into a one-sided success story. According to Pakistan, the documentary is less about presenting an objective historical record and more about shaping public perception. And that is where the real controversy begins. Pakistan calls out the documentary. Pakistan has rejected the Indian portrayal of Operation Sindoor. ISPR has described the documentary as factually inaccurate and accused New Delhi of using cinematic reconstruction and emotional messaging to reshape the battlefield narrative. Pakistan's argument is that the outcome of the war cannot be determined by television production. It cannot be decided through dramatic scenes, it cannot be established through selective interviews, and it cannot be changed simply because one country produces a more polished documentary. The battlefield already produced its own record. Aircraft were involved, missiles were launched, military installations were targeted, air defense systems were activated, and both sides were forced to respond to the actions of the other. Pakistan says those events cannot simply be edited out of history. The bigger problem for India, the central issue for Pakistan, is India's attempt to portray Operation Sindoor as a clean and complete military success. Islamabad rejects that description. Pakistan says the confrontation demonstrated that military action against a nuclear-armed neighbor carries serious costs. The Pakistani position is that India may have initiated military strikes, but that does not automatically mean India achieved everything it claimed. This distinction is important. Launching an operation is one thing, achieving every military objective claimed by the government is another. Pakistan therefore wants the international community to examine the complete record rather than accepting India's documentary as the final version of history. So the question is, can cinema replace battlefield evidence? This is perhaps the most important question. Can cinema replace evidence? The answer should be no. A documentary can present information, but presentation is not proof. A dramatic reconstruction can make an event look convincing. Music can recreate emotion, editing can determine what audiences see, interviews can reinforce a particular argument, but none of these automatically establish that every claim is accurate. When two nuclear-armed countries present competing versions of a military confrontation, independent verification becomes essential. Satellite imagery matters. Verified photographs matter. Aircraft records matter, independent investigations matter, statements from multiple sources matter, and evidence that contradicts a government's preferred narrative matters too. Pakistan's criticism of the documentary is therefore centered on the difference between storytelling and historical evidence. India's claims face Pakistan's challenge. India says Operation Sindoor achieved its objectives. Pakistan disputes that narrative. This disagreement is the heart of the current media battlefield. India wants the operation remembered as evidence of its military capability. Pakistan wants the conflict remembered as evidence that India could not act without facing a significant response. Both narratives serve strategic purpose. For India, the story is about deterrence and retaliation. For Pakistan, the story is about resistance and strategic balance. But the international audience is left with an important responsibility. Look beyond the headlines. Look beyond the cinematic production. Look beyond patriotic messaging and examine what can actually be independently established. Pakistan's message to India. Pakistan's response carries another message. Islamabad says that India's military actions cannot be presented without acknowledging Pakistan's response. Conflict is not defined only by who fires the first missile. It is also defined by what happens afterwards. How does the other side respond? Are military objectives achieved? What losses occur? What infrastructure is affected? How does the confrontation end? And perhaps most importantly, what does the other side learn from it? Pakistan says the Indian documentary is attempting to focus heavily on India's actions while reducing attention on the response that followed. That is precisely what Islamabad is challenging. The information war continues. The physical confrontation may have ended. The information war has not. India has its documentary. Pakistan has its rebuttal. Social media has its own competing narrative. Television channels have their own interpretations, and millions of people are being exposed to completely different versions of the same conflict. This is modern warfare. The battlefield is no longer limited to airspace and military bases. It also exists on television screens and mobile phones. A country that controls the narrative can influence how its population understands a conflict. It can influence international opinion. It can strengthen public confidence, and it can reinforce the credibility of its military. That is why documentaries like this matter. Why Pakistan is rejecting the Indian version? Pakistan does not want the Indian documentary to become the accepted historical account of Operation Sindoor. The reason is very obvious. If India's version becomes the dominant international narrative, Pakistan risks being portrayed as the side that simply absorbed India's military action. Islamabad wants to challenge that perception. Pakistan says the conflict was not one-sided military success. Instead, it argues that its response demonstrated the consequences India would have faced from further military escalation. This is why Pakistan's rejection is so strong. The issue is not merely a documentary. It is about strategic messaging. It is about deterrence. And it is about how the next India-Pakistan crisis may be interpreted before even if it begins. And now let's come to the nuclear reality. There is also a reality that neither documentary can change. India and Pakistan are nuclear armed states. That makes military confrontation between them fundamentally different from an ordinary conflict. Every military action carries escalation risks. Every threat has strategic consequences, and every claim of military superiority can influence future decision making. That is why exaggerated narratives can be dangerous. If one side convinces its population that it achieved an overwhelming victory, the political pressure to repeat similar action in the future can increase. Pakistan's argument is therefore not simply about defending its image, it is also about warning against narratives that could encourage further escalation. There is an important distinction between documenting an event and promoting a narrative. A documentary can contain genuine information. It can include interviews with officials who were directly involved. It can provide previously unseen footages, but it can still present events from one particular perspective. That is what Pakistan is challenging. The documentary may tell audiences what Indian officials believe happened, but that does not automatically settle every disputed question surrounding the conflict. Pakistan's position is that India's version should be treated as one side's account rather than final historical verdict. That is a reasonable standard whenever two countries provide conflicting accounts of a military confrontation. Ladies and gentlemen, India can produce a documentary, it can reconstruct events, it can interview officials, it can present its military perspective. But according to Pakistan, none of that changes what happened during the actual confrontation. Pakistan has rejected India's portrayal of Operation Sindoor as a complete military success and accused New Delhi of attempting to reshape the battlefield record through a cinematic narrative. The message from Islamabad is therefore very direct. A film can influence perception, a government can promote a narrative, a documentary can generate headlines, but none of these can erase independently established facts. Operation Sindoor will ultimately be judged not by a cinematic storytelling but by evidence. And that is precisely why Pakistan is refusing to let India's documentary become the final word on the conflict. This was Trending Daily. I'm Makhdoom Shahabuddin. See you in the next episode.